And then I now want to ask Anja, one of our board members, to introduce our first keynote speaker.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the board of EPOL, we are very proud to announce our opening keynote speaker, Annelie Perret-Clement. She is Professor of Psychology and Education at the University of Neuchâtel here in Switzerland. Her research focuses on the socio-cultural approach of thinking and learning and vocational training as contextualized activities. She actively enhances practical research in the areas of social work, health, fine arts, applied psychology, and education. For the EPOL, she will present a research methodology that puts the practitioner researcher and his professional expertise at the center of both the implementation process and the research endeavor. This topic represents one of the central areas of interest of EPOL. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome for Professor Annelie Perret-Clement.
My head is too small and I couldn't put the microphone, so I'll have to use this technology. Please tell me if there is some problem if I forget to be close enough to the microphone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I feel very honored and happy, Mr. Rector, Mr. Head of the Political and Administrative Authorities of the 3 cantons around here, to all the organizers of APRES and to all the participants. Thank you very much for giving me the word and welcome in this area known as the 3 Lakes. Before going into my speech, I would very much like to thank Professor Dr. Marcelo Giglio for offering me the use of the material of his doctoral dissertation and recent book, which you find on the bookshelf store there, for his interest and dedication in promoting educational and psychological research meaningful for teachers and students, and for his enthusiasm and generous sharing with all colleagues and students, including in organizing this April conference here in this part of Switzerland. We are very proud of you. I would also like to extend my thanks to the HEP Béjune professors, staff, and students for giving support not only to organize this conference, but also for support in the development and research, and for participating in it, and also for accepting that I will show photographs of them in the coming slides. I also thank my colleagues and friends in the university who have been very useful in promoting this research. Just 2 words on the outline of my talk. On the first part of the talk, and it's the main part of the talk, I will present a methodology which we have called, Marcelo Giglio and myself, Predicting, Implementing, and Observing, PIO if you want. It's a methodological proposal for research and development that can be extended in many ways. We'll just present a few illustrations. And then I'll move to further consideration and draw back on my political experience in science policy and make a few comments referring to the experience of being the president of the DORE funding for a few years. So, first part of the talk, predicting, implementing, and observing a methodological proposal for research and development. It started with different types of research projects in infant school, in primary schools, in Mexican schools, in introducing new technologies in this area of the world, in working in regional development in Poschiavo, etc. But it finally got formalized with Marcelo more recently. I will not keep you waiting for this end product until the end of the speech. I'll try to make things simple and try to present you this methodology methodology now. I hope it will look simple. Maybe it will look too simple, too straightforward, but then I will try to show you what's hidden behind and why we find it so important. So basically, the methodology is a very simple thing. It consists in preparing together. It can be, of course, it can be a teacher alone, but more often it's one or several teachers or regional authorities for education or a school headmaster, with or without researchers. In most of the cases where I was a researcher, there was a researcher around. It's not necessary. The idea is the first step is always preparing for the activity or the pedagogical sequence or the educational innovation. Usually you sit as a person or as a committee trying to design, making plans, drawing upon past experience, drawing upon literature, school visits, and all sorts of resources. And usually these motivated people have very good reasons for implementing the activity they have prepared. Now, our methodology requires a second step in which, before implementing what has been so carefully designed, the teacher, I will say the teacher to make it simple, but it can be the team, it can be the headmaster, it can be the researcher, but I will say the teacher and we'll go on varieties later. Well, the teacher says, I want to do this, I believe in it, I know why I want to do it, but let me try to predict what will happen. So the teacher, and I will put a feminine just for a change, she sits back and tries to write down what she expects, how she expects things to happen, what she expects from the students, how the task will be managed, how the partners will react, maybe the colleagues, sometimes the parents. Well, the idea is before implementing anything you have good reasons to implement, try to predict what's going to happen, and don't forget an actor when you try to make your predictions. Then you write this down and you put them away in a cupboard. You forget your predictions. The goal is not to be right in the prediction. You just forget the predictions, and you move to the third step, which is the implementation activity. And there, the idea is to do what has been prepared. Of course, it never really happens the way it has been prepared, so the implementation doesn't have to stick to the preparation. The preparation has been done the best as possible, but once a responsible teacher is implementing an activity, usually he or she has to adapt to what's happening. If possible, we try to video registrate or audio registrate what's happening. In some circumstances, especially in regional development, we had to have observers taking notes, some kinds of anthropologists taking notes. Well, the idea is to have some kind of record of what happened during the implementation. Then the fourth step, once the activity has been done, when the lesson has been carried out or the innovation installed, is to have some time to step back and reflect on what has happened. And the help to reflect on what has happened is this recording, the video recording, audio recording, or written reports, or photographs, and to try to confront what has happened to what had been predicted. And as reality is very complex and our minds are restricted, there is always a discrepancy between what has been predicted and what has really happened. Reality is always more complex, has many factors involved, and it's not possible to think about everything all the time, and also because there are some very local effects always when a project is instantiated. So the main hypothesis is that there is always a discrepancy between what has been intended and what's really happened, and please don't make wrong causal attributions. Nobody is to be blamed for. The reason is the complexity of real life and professional activity. Well, from this observation and from the confrontation between what we knew and what happened, we can learn a lot. We can learn a lot for the next activities, because we have lessons learned on what to implement next. But we have also a lot to learn about our preconceptions, about our predictions, about our restricted understanding of what was going on the professional side, but also in fundamental research perspective. Because it is with the confrontation between the prediction and the observations that we learn. So that's the basics. If you understood this, you understood my talk. But now I want to point to why we believe this is so important. This predict, implement, observation methodology, as you can see, is centered, focuses the attention on several actors. And the main one is the practitioner. The practitioner is at the center of this approach. This practitioner has goals, expertise, and creativity. And we want, with this methodology, to put as central the agentivity of the practitioner. I'll explain later what I mean by agentivity. The agentivity of the practitioner, both as a teacher and as a full member of the research process. Second, we want to focus attention on the students who come into the activity with their previous experience, their present creativity, as they develop and learn during the teaching. So the students are on the move. That was the subtitle of my talk. They are on the move because they come with maybe characteristics, but the educational goal is to have them move into new understandings. And then, of course, we are centered on the teaching and learning sequence with its task, role distribution, equipment. So, in PIO, teaching is considered a complex activity that cannot be reduced to performing instructions. An activity that engages the whole person of the teacher, his or her face, emotions, and cognitions. We often forget face and emotions. And teaching is a value-loaded activity. It's not a technical activity only. It's a value-loaded activity that requires taking responsibility for knowledge, of course, but also for class management, relationships, respect of the feeble, care for the growing generation of the students, relation to the world outside the classroom. And another presupposition in PIO is that we are all learners, not only students, but also teachers and researchers. So when we implement a learning activity, we expect not only students to learn, but also teachers and also researchers. And the teachers can be the researchers. The students, well, they know they'll have to learn skills, information, knowledge, social skills, planning, expressing, writing, and so on. The teachers, they'll have to learn more about the teaching process, the learning difficulties or facilities of the students, unexpected questions about task and subject matters, relationships to students, etc. And the teachers as researchers, or the researchers as co-helpers of the teachers, have to learn more about the development of teaching activities, but also of research methods and theoretical frameworks. They are offered by this approach data to explore scientifically the teaching learning processes, and they have opportunities to elaborate new knowledge, but also to decenter, I mean by that, to meet the understandings, the worldviews of the partners, students and professionals. Now let me make it clear, learning is not considered only as a gain of information. Internet is almost better than teaching in transmitting information. By learning, we mean gaining a deeper understanding that results from an active participation in an activity, an opportunity to reflect upon this activity and its result, appropriate teaching adjusted on the move, just on time, to the needs and affordances of the students. This means that once the activity is planned, the teacher should not feel condemned to do what has been foreseen. The teacher is a responsible person who adjusts the teaching on the move. And of course, learning is dependent on opportunities to exercise and reuse the new skills, understandings, and knowledge in subsequent activities. An important aspect in PIO is negotiating the outputs. And here I will rely on the words of De Jong in his lecture in April 2012. Impact on and contributing to the development, change, improvement of practice, developing theory, and last but not least, in the negotiating of what the output should be of this development and change, is a key difference of practice-oriented research compared to empirical, analytical, academic research. And this idea of on the move is that the teachers have to be kept within this research methodology responsible for the outputs, and hence responsible of keeping their voice vivid to negotiate what the output should be. Remember, I said teacher, in certain circumstances is head teacher, school authorities, but the idea is that the output is defined by those who are professionally in charge of these outputs. They can be negotiated with their partners, but they keep being responsible and so this means it's not the design of the research that is responsible. It's not a formal authority of designers that is responsible. It's the teachers on the move. All this implies that the agency of the persons has to be taken very seriously. I'll come back to this concept of agency. And you will maybe understand why I'm a psychologist in this business. Students are active learners. They will always be active. They might not be active the way teachers want them to be active. Well, this is part of the research process. How can you have students have active learners within your projects? For that, they need to be offered secure spaces for learning and for their personalities. Then teachers, if they are to be responsible, they are to be active in designing, framing, adjusting, observing, supporting, nourishing the activity of the students. They will offer information, techniques, reflection times, knowledge. And the role of the researchers in our methodology, and these researchers can be teachers and non-teachers, is negotiated with the teachers responsible, but the autonomy of the researcher, their critical distance, and their freedom of expression has to be respected. So now, back to agency as a key concept. What is agency? It's a word that I don't know how to translate, in fact, from Russian inspiration. But I've used the term key because I don't know how to translate properly. I will try to explain to you what I mean by the key of the person, which is one of the components of agency. And then I'll try to bring to the second component of the agency, which is the capacity of the person to meet social expectation. So agency relies on the key of the person and the capacity to meet social expectations. For that, I will do a little detour using George Herbert's Mead model of I and me. Mead says that the self is composed of the I and of the me. let's consider the demands put on the teacher and on the students by the school situation and its goal, and the conditions under which these persons, in spite of the demands or with the demands or for the demands, can be maintained in a position in which they are persons with an agency. So, help from Mead. The self is made of the me, that's the social self that responds to social expectation, and of the I, which is the seed, the source of the key. The consequences of this Mead model is that you have to be careful that the me doesn't have an unbalanced pressure, neither from the social context nor for the egocentric I. The me is a point of equilibrium between the social demands and the key, the I. What is key? Key is a strength from within. It leads to authorship, to motivation drive, to a sense of living, of accomplishment. I'll give you a few examples with pictures, and you will see the key alive in the pictures, I hope. For instance, a typical question that adults tend to address to a happy child showing his masterpiece is, "Great, how have you managed that? Who has helped you?" And a typical response of the 2 to 4 years old, slightly surprised, "But me, myself." Wow, that's the key that's expressing itself. And we're so disappointed to have to say, "I've been helped," or something asked me to do it. No, who has done this? Me, myself. Well, when you were 2 or 4 years old, you kept saying, "I'm sure, me, myself." And how is it now? When you grow up through childhood, adolescence, adulthood, professional identity, have you remained author of what you are doing? I hope so, but then you understand very well the pleasure of this child who is so successful in doing something. This key that reflects on her smile is a vital move, an impulsion, a force, a momentum, a breath, a libido, an interest, an agentivity, a creativity, the impetus, the adaptive activity that puts the person forward, active. I've taken this synonymous of key from various theories, Aristoteles, Claparède, Piaget, Dewey, and others, to say that the key stems from the interiority of the person, and you could go deeper into that with Freud, Winnicott, and others. The educational consequences of that is that we educators have to pay attention to the existence of the key in every person, to respect it, and to work on the affordances of the environment for the key to deploy itself. Let me go now through a few more examples of the key deploying itself. For that, look at the faces of the people on the picture, look at their drive, look at their move, look at their interests, look how concentrated and attentive they are. They are learning in the deep sense of learning in the pictures that I will show, because their key is at work. Here you see the child learning to stay straight on a very difficult situation. He's totally into his activity. These are learning hairdressings. Look at these two helping each other. I hope you have seen here illustration of the key of the student. Agency is a key concept that relies both on the key of the person and on meeting social expectations. Sorry, I'm just put again this slide to tell you that I'm now going to turn to the study of the social expectation. I've illustrated what the key means. Now let me turn to the social expectation. Well, this person with his or her key is always in a very complex social scene with many challenging social expectations. I will try to make it brief. So this is a schema pointing to the setting, the pedagogical setting, as an action and thinking space. It has been organized by the teachers, the designers, and so on. It's a lesson, or it can be a workshop, or it can be a field work. It's the setting. But the setting itself is taken in a wider frame, which I call here the context, with established role distribution, teacher, pupils, helpers, parents, and so on, with instructions, with roles, with resources. And this frame, which is very often the larger school, but in dual education it can be the enterprise, this frame is itself framed by a larger frame of the frame, which is the culture. And the culture is a complex environment with social expectations from families, from schools, from labs, from enterprises, from the communities. And these have implicit and explicit traditions, and in multicultural society, these might be plural and even conflicting. This creates the large sociocultural field. Just to remember that when we design and implement a given activity, a given setting with its action and thinking activities, we always implement it within frames that are larger and that will interact with the setting we implement. When we change something in a way of we teach divisions, for instance, we immediately have parents say, I can't have my child anymore if you don't follow the same algorithm to teach division as the one I learned. But this is already something external to the pedagogical activity that comes and interferes. But it's not maybe not the parents, it's maybe the professors in the secondary education afterwards, or it can be the employers who expect special skills. So as soon as we try to design a learning sequence or an innovation in a pedagogical setting, we have elements of the frames around that start reacting. Another way to say it is that when a teacher interacts with students on an object, for instance, learning division, and using mediation, it can be chalk and paper, it can be computers or other tools. This happens within a frame, the frame of the lesson or the setting design, but this is within the classroom, which is within the school system, within the local culture. The question is now, does the frame help just by framing, or does the frame freeze the situation? Is it possible to present new settings, deploy new activities, or are the frames supporting this innovation, or are the frames freezing the innovation? So the question becomes, how do the frames interact? Now that I have spoken about the agency of the teachers, the same for the students, or for the innovators, or for the researchers, or even for the political authorities, by showing there are always two levels, the key of the person and the social demands, and the social demands are embedded in complex frames, I would like to point to the fact that our PIO methodology is based on the spirit of any scientific approach with the goal of taking this complexity in consideration. So science tries to develop means to observe the décalage, the discrepancies that always exist between what is first believed to happen and what happens really. Another way of saying it is between hypotheses or representation, ideologies, misconceptions, and facts. And scientific researchers take the risk via proper methodologies to observe facts that might contradict their hypotheses, expectations and representation. They confront implicit and explicit hypotheses with facts. Well, that's what we pretend to do with our methodology. In the first step, we prepare the best we can with our present state of knowledge, our present conceptions and misconceptions, our goals. We prepare an innovation or a lesson or a specific task. Then we make predictions on what will happen, and so we will be able, in the fourth step, to face the discrepancies between the predictions and what really happened. That's when we expect to learn. So, as I've already alluded to, this PIO general schema can be applied in many different situations for different types of actions, for instance, to teach writing music, or to invent a situation in which children can be producing music, with different types of actors. I already said it. In different institutional contexts, it can be in dual education, in special education, adult further development, etc. And with different modalities of confrontation. It can be the self-confrontation, in which the teacher predicts and then confronts the results, but it can be also, as I have learned, of a group of Japanese teachers of primary schools who get together, prepare math lessons, then have them instantiated in their classes, and they visit their colleagues when they try out the math lesson that has been presented, and then they confront, it's self-confrontation, but it's also group confrontation, their predictions when they design the math lesson with what really happened in the different classes that they hold. From the student side, also, this methodology can be of different things. Can be asked from the students, alone or not, in different classrooms or fields, with different modes of confrontations. For instance, the students, how will they be confronted with their performance? Can they listen to look at the videos, listen to the recordings of what they've done? Will they just confront the results with the best possible way to answer the questions and be given errors? Or will they confront them to their goals? Will they have general discussions about that? Or self-dialogues or person-to-person dialogue with the teachers? This methodology allows to explore all these varieties of actions, and I have a bibliography at hand that I can give you on experiences along these lines. Now, I will just want to finish with an example from Marcelo Giglio's book on music education in primary school, a pedagogical sequence with the students' creativity at the center. The starting point was among all the things Marcelo is gifted for, one is music. He's a professional musicist and passionate of it. And he notices that in school, in fact, you very often learn to listen to music, write music, recognize music, but seldom to produce music. So the idea was to see, as it's required by the programs, but difficult to instantiate in the classrooms, how and under which conditions can young children in primary school be given opportunities to create music? Or can they only do that with their band in a garage? Can they do that also in school? So the first step was to prepare an activity, a teaching sequence, in which the teachers would offer an opportunity for the children in the classroom, in the usual classroom, to create a melody, compose a piece of music. Second phase, first phase the teachers introduce, second phase the children compose the music, third phase they perform a small recital in front of the classroom, and fourth phase they discuss on what they have done, on the performance, but also on the process that led to the performance. Fifth phase, the teachers introduces new elements of knowledge of technique to help students improve their performance next time, and introduces afterwards a further activity, either to exercise what has been done, practices it, or to go beyond. There are video registrations of all this. But as it's also a research project, the teacher in phase 1 not only prepares the sequence, but writes her predictions. And in phase 4, confronts her observation with the predictions. It's from this confrontation, the teacher has hypotheses on what to do next to help the students with some formal teaching and what should be the next activities. Now, some examples to show you that this was performed in normal classrooms in different countries in the world, in Switzerland, in Argentina, in Canada, and elsewhere. The pictures are mixed, you will see that the... So here, phase 1, the teachers introduce the activity and give some explanation to the students. Then the students work together to compose the task. This is a group working and writing down the composition. In the classroom in Argentina, the same thing. Another little group trying to write the composition and practicing it. And there the teacher moves from group to group to see how they work. You have the Western and the Argentine setting. They might open a small discussion if needed. And then comes the moment of the mini recital where the kids perform, do their concert of small composition in front of their schoolmates. Then comes the important moment where students are given an opportunity to reflect on what they have done and how they have done it. There are different tricks to make that successful. For instance, if you come with a video like the journalists, with an audio recorder like the journalists do, they really feel interview and reflect aloud on what they are doing. Then the teachers introduces new elements of knowledge to enrich the possibilities, capabilities of their students, and then they will go into another activity or repeat the same one to learn more from it. Now, as researchers, teachers, as researchers or researchers, can learn a lot from the observation of these activities and their products, from the notes written by the teachers, from the drawings of the children, from the registration of the mini recitals. You learn about the difficulties the children encounter, about what they have learned to do. Let me move to the results. In this piece of research on music, but you could also draw on all sorts of other examples, there are always many wonderful surprises. There is an invitation for the teachers and researchers to deepen the understanding of the teacher learning process. There is an opportunity to develop new professional skills, try them out, and look at the results. There is a possibility to develop pedagogical sequences, and all this opens new questions that sometimes can be addressed by the team, sometimes have to be addressed to other researchers. Let me give you a few examples of the results in the case of Giglio's research. Well, most of the teachers on the 3 continents were quite surprised to see how the students got deeply involved in this activity. All the groups of students have been successful in creating a melody. It was interesting to observe misunderstandings when the instructions were given and have opportunity to rectify the instructions and understand how students interpret the instructions. It was interesting to look again via the videos at the type of collaboration between students, how they organize the activity and what kind of help they can be given for that, how they allocate roles, how they manage conflicts, what they should be taught about conflict management, their absence of or presence of critical discussion among themselves, how they have or not the skills to negotiate their ideas, how they spontaneously scaffold each other, or how to invent strategic moves to bypass difficulties in order to reach the aim. It's also interesting to identify the difficulties encountered by the students on the move during the task. It was also very interesting for teachers, and sometimes even a bit emotionally difficult to see, the missed opportunities. For instance, the opportunities missed to reorient students' attention to the task. It was quite a surprise, most teachers say, to see how often they interrupted the students' activity, or how often the teachers tried to write down the melody instead of letting the students do it. It was interesting to see the kind of support students asked for and whether the teacher agreed or not to give it. And also to see that sometimes explanations given by teachers are disruptive. And beyond this first observation, many teachers told us how they had been surprised to discover that the children were capable of much more than what they had predicted before. For instance, let me just quote this example from this teacher. At the beginning, the students will perhaps feel slightly lost. I will have to let them find their way by themselves. But if I see that it doesn't work at all, then I will go to a group and help them. They might also not get along well with each other, but they will quickly understand that they have to come to common decisions in order to have a melody, to produce a time. I skip the second example because of time. Well, the general feeling is that an open space is left for the students' action and creativity, then the teacher's control of the situation will decrease. Hence, the teachers often had some time of anxiety that things would not go straight. But after the implementation, we had many comments of the kind I give you here. I felt under pressure with the feeling that all was going to go wrong. I suffered and felt uncomfortable, and I was trying to imagine ways to rescue the situation. When the group started to write down their composition, I thought that I had not understood the instruction, that they had not been able to explain, and that I felt bad because I felt I had not been able to explain the procedure, and I was really expecting the worst results. But this is not how things went. When I walked from one group to the other, I noticed that they were very well at work and that the compositions were creative, and this was later confirmed when I had their predictions in my hands. So I'll skip this because I don't have time. I want to just point to the fact that it's interesting to see this transition from the teacher, from the usual classroom situation to the innovative setting that has just been created, how much it requires from the teacher new knowledge, new professional identity. Stop explaining all the time. Look and see and explain just on time. New understandings and meanings of what's happening. It's not that the children have not understood the instructions, for instance. It can be something else. It opens new partnership because with such methodologies, teachers can be not left alone anymore, but have opportunities to look at the videos with other teachers or with school or with teacher trainees or with developers. They can make more precise their demands to developers and open questions to be addressed to researchers. And then my last point, which I find fundamental, but I won't dedicate much time to this, are funding agencies in our country and Europe giving the proper support to sustain such field-oriented research? Are the funding agency having the proper management system and the proper criteria to respect the complexity of professional action, the agency of teacher, their responsibility? Are they organized in such a way that they can really give support to the key of the professionals? Usually, no. Usually, the tradition is top-down application of research to the field. You have people, they might have been teachers before, but now they are designers and researchers. They develop what they think is the best, stage one, And then they say to the teachers, please do it, implement it. And then usually they are disappointed. Top-down research often has limitations that are disappointing. I like very much Sandoval's remark, who shows how much it's difficult to generalize such implementations, to find, you get in the pilot studies the research, very good result. When you go to other schools, other teachers, that doesn't apply anymore. Or if you change school system, it doesn't apply anymore. So the effort that we have tried to do here in Switzerland with DORE 1 and DORE 2 was to build a research fund, to create a research fund that, and it functioned the way I said, the way I will tell during the years 1999 to 2003. Then it was further developed in a slightly different perspective. But the idea of DORE 1 and DORE 2 was to establish at the national and institutional level a triangular partnership between professionals in the fields, a research team, and the funding agency, DORE. The research proposal had to demonstrate, if not, there was no funding. First, its relevance for the field. It had to demonstrate support from the field, and support was not lip compliance. It was giving time, access, and equipment. And it had to demonstrate that there was an initiative, you find the key there, an initiative on the part of the professionals, and they felt responsible for it. It had to demonstrate its relevance for the present state of scientific literature, and it had to demonstrate the adequacy of methodology and theoretical frames. I don't have time for examples, but I can give you links to sites with examples. The result was that there were much fewer problems with the transfer of results as the field was involved right from the start. There were much fewer problems of disseminations, much fewer problems of motivations, and all the political negotiations was done ahead of the research and not afterwards. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Annelie Perret-Clement, for this interesting presentation. In one moment, I give you a little present. If you have questions for this keynote, you can go to the Q&A session. That's in room 624, in room C. And otherwise, you can go to the cloud poster sessions or to the poster sessions of the awards. Thank you very much.